Welcome back to another episode of the Women of Faith podcast. This week, I am really excited because I have a special guest joining me. And this is a woman who I feel God has specifically brought into my life, not to just be a part of my own personal journey and growth, but that He has allowed me as well to be a part of her own journey. And I have worked with her for the past, what,
Mm-hmm.
5 years. Um, and so I have not just worked with her as a coach, as a workshop facilitator, but she has grown to be a really important person in my life. She's a friend, she's my mentee, she's a little sister, like she's all of these things. And it has been such a pleasure to just witness her growth throughout these few years that I have known her. And I wanted to have her on because for me, it's really important to share stories of women who have really just broken past some of the ways that I think life attacks us. We experience things that um, we don't expect. It's those moments, I think, that we find ourselves questioning God and his motives, and sometimes we don't understand his ways. But it's through the journey that I think we also grow in our faith, and we learn that maybe we don't have to understand God's ways. We have to accept them, and we just ask him to help us get through. And she has done that so beautifully. She has an incredible story of just journeying beyond grief. And that's really what I want this conversation to be on. I'm not going to get into the story. I'm going to introduce her, my good friend, Chastity Lecour. And I just want you to, I guess, Chas, introduce yourself a little bit to the audience and then kind of get into your story. And I really want us to start from how we met. We met back in 2019. And I was just telling her, I don't remember the specifics of how we met, other than there was a chance encounter at my church, that although I say it's a chance encounter, I know better. I know that God's hand is always in everything. So yeah. So introduce yourself, my love.
Hi, Nancy. Hi, everyone. My name is Chastity, and I'm today. Like, really, I feel really good about like sitting down with you today and talking because I was thinking about it and saying, "Wow, like it's 5 years later since we met,"
Yeah.
and to sit here with you today, knowing that you have done things like this with other women before, makes me feel like I had to have gotten through a lot in order for me to now have like this moment where I can maybe, like you said earlier, help someone else who was probably in the same position like I was. I'm like happy to share my story because in sharing my story also pushes me even more to keep getting through life and kind of going through these surviving the storm,
Yeah.
right? We definitely did meet in 2019. And that for me was like, woof, the hardest, very hard time for me. My mom had passed away in 2018. And when I met you, it was because I found you on Instagram. And I really wasn't actively social, but somehow I kept seeing your page. And during that time, you were talking about vision boards and you had mentioned Church Girl. And my mom had just made a year passing away. And I think that was like, it was the hardest moment for me a year later. It wasn't necessarily when it happened because I had to now figure out life without her. It
Yeah.
was a year later where I found myself sitting in this dark space, feeling like I was just trapped in a corner, didn't know what to do, felt like I had nothing to live for. And meanwhile, you would have thought like a year later, I should be better. And I
Yeah.
wasn't better because nothing really had changed. I was finally allowing myself to feel what had happened to me. And so on for my mom's anniversary when she made a year, it was like maybe like a day or two before church girl, and you had been posting about like, you know, people should come by, and I felt so lost. And about 30 minutes before church girl was starting, I just threw on some clothes, got in an Uber, and just went. Feel a little
Yeah.
it's kind of, I feel
It's,
like I haven't talked about this in a long time, like that
yeah.
moment. But that was that moment, like I had to make a choice, and I had to decide, like today was the day that I have to start working on getting my life back. And
Mhm.
I showed up at church girl, and who knew that I was going to try to sit exactly where you were sitting, and you and I had never met before.
Crazy.
Super
Crazy.
crazy. And then, you know, for me, like the best one of the best parts was at the end of church girl, aside from the experience that I had there, but at the end of church girl, you and I got to exchange a few words, and I got to tell you a little bit of what I was going through, and I got to mention to you like, hey, I bought a ticket to, you know, attend your workshop. And you know, and I didn't go because of that. I went because I kept hearing you, and it was just like this sign, like just go, go, go. And
Because there was something, see, it's so important. And I don't want to cut you off, but I think that for anyone that finds themselves in a season of transition, especially when you find yourself in the lowest, darkest parts of your life that you've ever experienced, God is so good in the way that he shows up, right?
yeah.
And a lot of times it is that whispering,
Mm-hmm.
that little voice that's in your head or that little thing that you feel in your body. And a lot of times we say, "Oh, I don't know what it was, but it was something. There was something that was telling me to go." And that something is God. Like that is how he starts to nudge at us, right? And you said something really important. You said you had to make a decision. You
Mm-hmm.
made a choice, right? And 30 minutes before it started, you was like, you know what? I'm gonna just go.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in that decision of saying, I'm just gonna go that started the real journey for
Yes.
you. And I remember now that like now as you're recounting it, like I remember very vividly. um I was at church girl, I was with Roxy, and we were sitting, like we had reserved seats, and I only had the seat because of Roxy, because she was like the member of Trinity. She had the relationship with the pastors, so there were like reserved seats for certain people. And then when you said, hey, said, can I sit here, I was like, well, I'm just a guest, and I was like, and all of this is reserved. But even in that exchange, I had no idea that it was you, right? Until afterward, or
Yeah.
you said you had come up to me and was like, oh, I follow you on Instagram, and I bought the ticket to your vision
Yeah.
board. And we had such a touching conversation in the hallway,
Mm-hmm.
of the church girl conference. And there was something about you that in my spirit was telling me, you have to make sure that she's okay,
Yeah.
So, and then okay, so we have the conversation, and you bought the ticket to the vision board workshop.
You're making me super mushy. Um, that day was no accident. Like there was it def now, years later, you know, that I do have like a relationship with God. At that time, I don't think it ever occurred to me to say like this was God. You know, he sent me to church girl. He pushed me towards meeting Nancy, and like he made this happen. During that time, I didn't even think that because I could barely think.
Yeah.
And but I do know now, like that was not an accident. I was meant to meet you there, not at the workshop first. And the reason why I know now I was meant to meet you at church girl and have that little few minutes of this personal time with you, was because after mentioning that I had bought a ticket for your workshop, well, I missed the workshop, and
Yeah.
I didn't show up to the workshop, and I didn't show up because I was still struggling. I was really still struggling. I was in so much pain. I was still dealing with so much grief, and it was super hard for me. I couldn't even believe that I made it to church girl. And had you not met me at church girl, you may not have had remembered to say, let me go find Chastity.
Yeah,
Why
you're
isn't she
right.
here today? Why didn't she show up to this workshop when you knew after speaking to me that I needed it? And you just
Yeah,
confirmed it now when you said there was something nudging you to say, like, you need to help this girl.
yeah,
So like now, 5 years later, I know that everything was aligning a
yeah.
certain way, and I had to be at church girl first.
Yeah, it's so true because you're
Yeah.
right. Had we not met there first, there would have been, had we not met at Church Girl first, and had we not had the conversation that we had, where you shared with me everything that you were going through, because you were very transparent in
Mhm.
the few minutes that we talked. Like, I learned so much about you and how much you were struggling with the grief of losing your mother the year before, that there was like, I have to make sure that I follow up with her. Like, I knew that there was something um connecting us, and that it was going to be so much more than I think either one of us expected. So
Yeah.
when you didn't show up, like for the workshop, like I was waiting for you to show up, and then when you didn't, I was like, okay, I need to check in on her, because I need to see why
Yeah.
she didn't make it. And that, I have to say that 2019 was probably the year where I had the most vision board workshops like I had that I've ever had, like in 1 year. And your workshop that you were supposed to go to and you missed was the last one for me.
Mhm.
Like, it was the last one. I
Yep.
had no intention of hosting another one, because that was the fourth one I had already done. I was exhausted, and I was like, and it takes a lot to plan them, to find locations, like to set everything up. But as fate would have it, or as God would have it, there was this other girl that was following me on Instagram
Yeah.
who wanted to attend one of my workshops. She had missed all of them. She owned a gym in Brooklyn, and she was like, I will provide the space. I have a back area where we can do it if you just come and do the workshop. And she was like, you don't have to pay for this space. Like, it was like everything was like aligning. And
Yes.
I was like, you know what? Okay, fine. I will come do this for you. I will see who comes. And more people came registering. I was like, okay. And that one, I had reached out to you, and I was like, listen, I'm having one last workshop. I will honor your ticket from the one that you missed, but I really need you to come.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And
Yes.
then
I remember when I received that message, I was like, uh, I was excited to read that, because it like made me feel like, okay, I had like a second chance, even though I really at that moment had no idea if I'd be able to make it again.
right.
Just because I at that stage in my life, I didn't really know what my days were going to be like. The only thing I was sure of is that it was really, really dark, really gloomy, and it was a lot easier for me to stay inside in that darkness than it was for me to get myself outside, and so when I accepted the invitation to attend for the second time, I was really happy that you reached out to me. Like, that definitely meant a lot to me. Also, again, like years later now, when we're able to talk about it, it shows that you were listening, and that you heard me. I was seen, I was heard, and like that conversation we had at church girl, it just didn't kind of go over your head. So I'm super appreciative of that. And I remember when the day finally did come, I couldn't get up
Mm.
again.
Yeah.
I couldn't get up again. And I remember I had friends that was like, no, 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 you have to go. And then finally I pushed myself and I had someone take me. And I messaged you because of the fact that I couldn't get up again. I was running late.
Yeah.
I remember messaging you on Instagram and saying, hey, I'm coming, but I'm running late. And, it was really hard for me. And you said specifically to me, come, we are going to wait for you. Just come.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I have chose saying that. Like, I literally still feel super, super emotional remembering like that moment and that conversation with you and that message, because you kept your word. Like you were like making all these promises to a stranger. You know, you were like doing anything you had to do to make sure that I was going to be okay and I got the help I needed. And I remember, like, I could see it right now. I like literally see the image in my head. I remember getting there and running inside. There was a bunch of women chatting, you at a table, and I ran to you and I'm like, I made it.
Mm-hmm.
And you gave me a hug and I started crying. And like the way you hugged me was like you knew me. You hugged me like you hugged me then, how you hug me now. And that's
You're
crazy.
gonna make me
We
cry.
didn't know each other. And you hugged me then, how you hug me now. And I was really still a stranger. And like that hug made me feel safe. And I was super like super appreciative to know that you waited for me and that I had like this opportunity to try again. And literally, like ever since that day, my life changed.
Mm,
Ever, and like I know it started at church girl with meeting you, but ever since I ran into that room, because I didn't walk, I ran to you.
yeah.
Um, everything was different. And like that's why I said like this was God. Like he made sure he was like, no, you're getting up today, you're getting get there. And Nancy, she's gonna wait for you, and that's it. And
Yeah.
now, and then you've been stuck with me ever since.
And so it has been my greatest joy to have bared witness to how you have intentionally transformed your life. And the reason why I wanted to have this conversation with you is because I know how difficult it is to transform, to make any change in your life is hard. But to decide to do that when the life that you knew, where the world that you had literally crumbles beneath you, it's like, how then do you pick yourself up from the rubble of that, right? And here you are, someone who lost their mother, who was your life. You're an only child for the most part, right? You didn't grow up with any siblings. It was just you and your mom. Your business was together. She was your best friend. Um, and for those who are listening, Chastity's mom lost her battle with cancer. So there was a point in that journey where Chastity was also her mother's caretaker and was doing like all of the things. And then you find yourself alone
Yeah,
by yourself, that the person you would normally go to
yeah,
and turn to for help, for guidance, like, mom, what should I do, is no longer there. And then how then do you pick yourself back up?
yes. Um, I didn't know. I didn't know how. I really didn't know how. And I at the time was like what, 37 years old. Like you would think at that age I would have known how to pick myself back up. But you are never like prepared
Never.
what grief is going to feel like. And even though at some point it was clear that I was going to lose my mother, I wasn't prepared for it. I wasn't preparing for it. I was just really in the moment. And like you said, I was also her caretaker. So that was my focus. Like during the time that my mom was sick and I was taking care of her, I wasn't thinking about what am I going to do when she dies? I
Right.
was thinking about how am I going to keep her alive?
Right.
That was literally my goal, like save your mother every day. And for those listening that don't know who I am and don't know my story, yeah, my mom was my life. She was my best friend. Like you said, I'm an only child. We had a daycare together. We worked together. We lived together. We literally did everything. And all my life, we did everything together. And so when I lost her, I always say to myself, like, I lost everything. And there was a part of me that felt like I died with her. I did. And I did not know how to survive. I didn't know I was supposed to start over. everything I did in my entire life, I went to my mother for confirmation, for validation, for her opinion. And now she wasn't there, and it's like, oh God, what, how am I gonna know that every step moving forward is the right one? And also, how am I gonna live without the one person who who just who gave me life,
Yeah.
and who gave me this type of love that I knew was going to be irreplaceable. And my grief for me was super hard because it wasn't just dealing with the loss of a mother and my mother died, right? I think I was grieving my mother, and then I was also grieving my old life. Right?
Yes.
So my experience with grief was on like multiple levels, so I had to deal with life without mom, as
Yeah.
I call it. Then I had to deal with, oh, what happened to my life? Like, oh,
Right.
everything is different now. So, in the midst of my mom being sick, I decided to temporarily close the daycare, which ended up being permanent because when she passed away, I needed to heal, and I couldn't see myself doing it again. And not because I couldn't do it on my own, but because I was so sad and I was so broken. And like, how can you care for children like
Yeah.
that? And then I had to figure out what was next for me. I had to figure out, like, how am I going to replace this love that I don't have anymore? And so it was a lot. And then I also had to deal with that I was grieving her as a daughter, and then I had like this other level of grief from what I saw and seeing her suffer. And I had to figure out how I'm going to get that vision out of my head too, because there was trauma that came with it. In taking care of my mother, I saw her suffer daily. And so imagine like having a mom who was super strong and you look up to. And my mother was the type of woman that she worked all her life. She took care of the house, she cleaned everything, like she did everything. To me, she was superwoman. And then in the blink of an eye, she couldn't do anything on her own. So now it's like I'm bathing my mom, feeding my mom, wheeling her around, dressing my mother, changing her diaper. Like that was heavy. There was no moment for me to stop and say, is Chastity okay? What
Yeah.
does Chastity need? It was do whatever you need to do to keep your mother alive, to have another day with her, and give your mother everything that she gave you. Give your mother everything that she taught you. I never imagined myself being able to care for someone like that. I think in doing all these things for my mother is when I realized that I actually am strong.
Mhm.
And not the after she passed away and then the healing process that said, wow, you're strong. Not just that, but being present in that moment and going through all of that and surviving it, that's when I said, wow. Because I was someone that I couldn't look at a needle. And so many people later on said, what, do you want to be a nurse? Have you ever thought about it? In the hospital, they would tell me because I would spend nights there. And I said, no, like I'm doing it because it's my mother.
Mhm.
I'm doing it because it's what I'm supposed to do. And not because I felt forced, but because it was the right thing. Like I loved my mother. And so it was so many levels to the pain that came with my mother passing away that I didn't think I could heal. I didn't know where to start. And that's how when I met you, I say all the time, like I met you when I hit rock bottom. Because how do you get past all of that? And I found myself with nothing. I didn't have a mother, I didn't have my best friend, I didn't have my business, so it means I didn't have work. I was feeling a lot of anxiety, I was depressed, and I gave up. I really feel like I had given up. And yeah, I'm fortunate I had family and I had some close friends who were definitely there. But people can push you, they can call you, they can knock on your door, they can say, come out, but it doesn't mean that you will, it doesn't mean that your life is going to change. Like I did have support. I just couldn't do it yet. And I had to reach a point in my life where I started realizing like, well, you need to do something about it. Like you have, like if you want to keep on living and if you want to live for your mother, you
Yeah.
get up, and so now all these years later, I constantly think about like, man, my mom is not here to have another holiday. She's not here to have another birthday. She's not here to dance, and listen to music and like see the sunset. So you need to get up and do it. You need to
Mm.
get up and go look at the sunset, and watch the sunrise. And so that has like pushed me along the way.
What has been, because it has been, your mother passed away in 2018, so that 6 years, right? Because she just had
Yes.
her anniversary this month,
Yeah,
right?
on the 15th, the
On
day
the
of Valentine's.
and so what would you say to the chastity of 6 years ago, right? Knowing what you know now about your journey, knowing where you are and how significantly your life has changed, right? And we'll talk a little bit about where you were in complete, darkness and loneliness and isolation to where you are now. Like you're thriving. I would say that you're happy, you're back in a career where you're working with children, which is your passion. You recently moved into a brand new apartment. Like all of like how do you get from where you were to where you are? And what would be the advice you would tell, that chastity? Because you have lived through it now.
When I think about what would I have told that chastity, I think about what would I tell someone else right now if they were in that same position. And I think I would tell them, for starters, I would say, allow yourself to feel,
Mm-hmm.
be okay with not being okay, because there's no timeline to your grief. Everyone grieves differently. And it's super important to acknowledge how you're feeling and not hide how you're feeling. So when you have those moments that you need to cry and you want to scream and shout, have them, but don't stay there. Find the strength to then say, okay, I cried, but now I'm gonna get up. And like any small step is really a big step when you're feeling like how I was feeling. So even if it means today all you did was open the blinds, to your window and you let some light in, even if it means that you only had the energy maybe to talk to one friend today. I would also say let let people in, you
Mm.
let those that want to help you, let them. I was raised to be super independent and to really only rely on my mother. So it was very hard for me to accept help. It was hard for me to let friends and family like pick me up and say, "We got this. All you have to do is show up." It was super hard, and I had to eventually say, okay, I do need them. I was just so used to relying on my mother that now I felt like I just had to rely on me. And during that time, that first like year and a half, I I didn't have a relationship with God. So during that time, I didn't even know how to rely on him. And so I would tell old Chastity, like, show yourself some grace, which is what I've learned now. Give yourself grace. Let yourself kind of go through the get through the process. Don't push yourself too hard, and everything will be okay. Like keep reminding yourself, like it's gonna be okay. I didn't think that I could be like I would ever get back to being my old self again.
Mm.
And the truth is, like, I'm not my own self again. I'm a new me, with parts of my old self, right? But I used to think, oh, I miss who I was. I missed who I was. And then now I'm here 5 years later and I'm like, oh, I love who I am now.
Oof. Yeah.
Because who I was before hadn't gone through all these rough roads, and who I was before, well, I didn't know I was this strong, and now I know. And so for me now, you mentioned a few minutes ago when you said, well, I'm happier now. Something that I love now, uh, 5 years later into working on myself, but 6 years since my mom's death, is that when I have, whether it's friends, family that haven't spoken to me a while, or just casually messaging me and they ask, hey, how you doing? I love now that I can say, I'm good.
Mm,
The last few times that I've been able to say it in the past couple of months, I really like acknowledged that moment. Every moment that I've been able to tell someone I'm great, I feel those words.
yeah,
And when I feel them, I'm like, wow, I just said I'm great. And I remember before saying like, yeah, I'm broken,
yeah,
I'm sad, or not saying nothing, not even responding to the question because I had no words, So to like think about old Chastity and new Chastity, I I'm proud of myself. And I think that's something I would also tell someone else, like, stop and remind yourself how proud you are,
mm,
because we can hear it from other people, but when you tell yourself, I'm proud of you, you know, that's a different feeling. And as a teacher in the classroom, I teach 5-year-olds, and something that I teach them even at 5-year-olds at that age is to be proud of themselves. I tell them all the time, and then I ask them, are you proud of yourself? And when they tell me yes, that makes me happier, because I needed to get to a place where I felt good. Because like
right,
I said before, everyone can tell you these things,
right,
but do you believe it? Do you feel it yourself? And it took me a very long time to feel it. And this is where your vision boards, oof, they kicked in for me, because that first vision board that I created was really so much about teaching my soul to be happy again, and all
yeah.
the little steps that I needed to incorporate into my life to start to learn to feel good again. And it really held me accountable. It was a slow process, but I got here.
How do you get through the difficult moments now? Because I think it's important for anyone that is experiencing grief to recognize that there are going to be moments where you're going to feel sad again. Because I know that, there are moments for you where you're like missing your mom a little bit more, or moments where you allow yourself to really think about it and be like, wow, she really isn't here. And those moments, they make you sad. But what I've learned from watching you is that the difference between this chastity and the old chastity is that you no longer allow those moments to paralyze you.
Yeah.
So how do you get through those moments now?
I love that you asked me this question, and I also love that you just said I don't allow those moments to paralyze me, because that's exactly how I used to feel. I used to feel like paralyzed. Like once I crashed emotionally because of my grief, because of just everything I was feeling, I felt stagnated. I felt paralyzed, like I could not move. And it's crazy. Some people don't understand what that feeling is until you're experiencing it in that moment. There's so many people that think that they can just tell you, come on, get up. And you're like, okay, yeah, I can get up. Everybody's making me laugh. No, you're like stuck. And so I think now, like, I know now the way I'm able to get through those things, well, it's because I have a relationship with God now. It's because I've done so much work. It's because throughout the years, like as I've done like all this work on myself and I stayed committed to myself and to like wanting to heal, that I got to see blessings, right? Little by little, the blessings started to come in. And
Yeah,
like when you start to see the blessings and you start to feel the blessings, you on your bad days, you remind yourself of like, wait a minute, I just had a good day. Or like, look
right.
look around you. Oh my God, look at where I'm at now. This is not the same place I'm at before. So the way I pick myself back up is to remind myself where I was at before and where I'm at now, and to really like stop for a second and notice the difference and to live in gratitude, right? So something that's helped me tremendously is this this attitude of gratitude. Like every day I wake up and I'm like, thank you, God. Like, thank you, God. There's moments that I'm walking out the door, I'm like, thank you, God, for this door.
Yeah.
It may sound crazy, but when
Yeah.
you're in a place that you felt like you had nothing and
Yes.
you finally have things, and you're
Yeah.
like, thank you for this cup right now that I'm drinking this coffee in, and I feel so good in the moment I'm drinking it. It's like it
Yeah. It
sounds
is.
silly, but it's not. And I think that sometimes in life we take those small moments for granted. I don't take any of that for granted anymore. Like the smallest moment, the simplest gesture to me is huge. And so I love that you also asked me this question, because just because I'm better and it's like 6 years later doesn't mean that I'm over grieving.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, you anyone that's listening and they lost a parent, a spouse, a friend, a child, whoever, a family member, like it's important for everyone to know that, that pain may never fully go away. There's always this piece of my heart that's going to be broken, that will be missing. And I have now, I've accepted that that's okay, because I'm not supposed to be 100% without my mother. Like,
Right.
who, how? That was my
Yeah.
mother. So
Yeah.
I've accepted that, like, I will always feel some pain, but how I handle it is what will help me along the way. So, like, it's not, I have my rough times during the holidays. I'll have like a little bump in the road for my mom's birthday. We're not robots. And I remind myself all the time, like, you know what? It's okay for you to feel. It's okay that it hurts, because that was your mother. But I go and I listen to my worship music. I have conversations with God.
Mhm.
I reach out to you.
Mhm.
know,
Yes.
um, one thing that I will say to anyone listening that experiences grief and goes up and down with it is be honest. On those days
Yeah.
where you're not feeling your best, and suddenly you're like, wait a minute, I was good. It's been a whole month. I was fine. And why am I feeling sad? Or why is this my mom not so heavy in my mind? Be honest, tell someone. And I do that now. I'll say, I'm not really having a good day. Like, I don't know. I really miss my mother today.
Right.
And then your day will turn around,
Yeah.
acknowledge it.
One thing that you said was that you did the work. And I think for people that are listening who might find themselves right at the beginning of their journey, who may not necessarily know what that work is, what did it look like for you?
Oh, the work was hard. It was not easy. I don't think work is ever easy when you're working on yourself,
Right.
especially if you're trying to repair every single aspect of your life. My first vision board with you was flooded. Like there was not one corner of that board that was not covered. It had so much on it, because that's exactly how I felt. When I came to it, I said, I lost everything. I have nothing and I don't know what to do. I feel hopeless. So of course my board was going to be flooded, and it was overwhelming initially to look at it and say, wow, I need to do all this. But doing in when I started, I think I was like I try to be strategic about it. Like I decided I had to make a decision on, well, what's most important right now. And
Yeah.
so before I can go chase these big goals, like either reopening a business again or just going back to work again, I knew I needed to do some healing within. And so I made that my first step. And once I started doing that, then it kind of started to help me get up. You
Yeah.
know, it made me feel a little bit more confident. It gave me a little more strength. And then I started saying, okay, like what's the first big goal? And once I started tackling that first big goal and then I accomplished it, I felt good.
Yeah.
So for me, like the process of like repairing your life and starting over is like once you take that first step and you realize how different you start to feel about yourself, now you're chasing that.
Yeah.
It's almost like, when people have addictions and they're like, oh, I need some more of it. So now I became addicted to like this new feeling because it felt good. And I was like, okay, what am I gonna do next? Because I want to keep feeling like this. Like you have to really want it. And I got to this place where I started to really want it. And you were holding me accountable. You know, you would reach out to me and have these conversations with me, or the days where I felt like, oh God, I don't know how am I gonna do this. Um, I got that support from you, you know, and going to church,
Mm,
going to
mm.
church. And you know what's crazy? In a year and a half, almost 2 years after I did my first board with you and after meeting you, COVID hit.
Yeah.
And I was scared. And you know what I told myself? I said, how how's this gonna happen to me? Like, yeah, and I was saying to me, and the whole world was going through this to me. You know why? Because I had just finally started waking up and I
Yeah.
finally started working on myself. And now the world is shut
Shutting
down.
you down.
I
Yeah.
was, I was so scared. And that is when I started going to church online virtually. And you
Yeah.
were also live a lot. So every time you were live, I was catching your lives. And so I made a choice again. All right,
Right.
you locked in, but are you gonna now hide? I was so scared that I was gonna go back to how I was months prior. And I didn't allow that. And I used to something that helped me a lot too. I had post-its and I started writing on these post-its. And I remember I used to sit at the desk, I had the computer, and above it, it was a bare wall. And I had post-its. And one day I just would start writing like whatever my hopes were, whatever my prayers were, whatever my dreams were. And I didn't write a ton, just be like a day. And
Mm-hmm.
like suddenly it sort of became like my prayer wall,
Mm-hmm.
but it didn't have to be like what I grew up knowing was a prayer, like an Our Father, Hail Mary.
Right. Yes.
You know, it was just like these reminders of like what I wanted and what I needed. And it was also like, hey God, you know, let me put this up here. You can hear it, please see it. And I was seeing it. And when I finally moved, I had this wall so full. But the best part for me was when I finally moved, and this is now 5 years later, 4.5 years later, I started taking down the post-its. And as I was taking them down, I was reading them. And I said, wow, this came true. This,
Mm. Isn't it lovely how God works? Right?
mhm,
When we don't even, when it's happening, we don't realize it. It's just in those moments where we allow ourselves. This is why so much of the work that I do involves self-reflection, because it's in the self-reflecting that we really get to see how God has had a hand in our lives every step of the way, where the things we were once praying for have become the blessings that we're currently living in. And, I love that you said you live with this attitude of gratitude, because I think that that's what gratitude does. It reminds us of how we are currently living in an answered prayer.
yes,
And we have become a culture and a society always looking for the next best thing, that sometimes we forget to just be grateful for where we are. Like
mhm,
right now, in this moment, the fact that we're sitting right in the middle of a blessing, or in the middle of an answered prayer. And that when we're grateful for what we have, for what God has already done for us, it multiplies our blessings, right? Because God can't bless someone who's ungrateful.
right.
Because when you're ungrateful for what you have, you're not going to be grateful for anything more. You're going to take whatever you get and be ungrateful for that too. So it's like the more you're grateful for, the more God blesses you with.
Yeah. And he's also not going to bless someone who's, well, not doing the work either. So, you know, something I've learned in attending Bible study with you and going to church online and in just my life itself is that I can pray to God for all these things and I can come to him and say, God, please help me with this. God, please bless me in this area. And if I just come to him and ask him for these things, but I sit there and do nothing, well, it's not really going to completely happen. So I've learned like I have to meet him halfway too. Like I have to do the work also because sometimes so many people they think that they're living in unanswered prayers, but it's because they're not seeing like when God says, okay, here, because they're not getting up to receive it. And so
Yeah.
I learned that okay, you just asked God for this. So now be mindful of how you're living after that moment that you asked God for this because He's going to come through and you have to be ready. And so that was super important for me because I knew like I can't just sit here and ask him for everything and then let him do all the work. You know, I had to do the work. I really did have to do the work. And, you know, something that I would tell everyone also is like, and we hear this all the time, do it afraid.
Yeah.
I was afraid. I still get scared, you know, and like sometimes you doubt yourself, especially when you're in these moments that are so challenging and so hard. You feel sometimes helpless. You feel like there's no way out. Just go for it. Like jump anyway. And that has taken me a long time to be okay with because I do tend to overthink. You get scared. I always wanted things to be aligned before I tried something. Now I've been slowly encouraging myself to say, all right, just do it and trust God. Years
Mm.
ago, I couldn't say that. I
Yeah.
didn't say just do it and trust God. I would just be like, oh my God, how's this gonna work out? And in having faith and in trusting Him, I saw my life change dramatically. And I am like, I'm so happy about that. I'm really so happy about that. And whew, 6 years ago,
I know.
I
It
was not happy.
it almost, I mean, 6 years is a long time, right? When you think about it, like
Yeah.
6 years. And I know like how much work you have put into it. Like I know how hard some of your days have been, you know. What would you think your mother would say to you right now? Her looking at you.
I think that she would she would say to me what she's always said to me. Even after she died, I found a card from her that said, I'm so proud of you.
Mm,
And she always said to me, like, I'm so happy to be your mother. Um, you know, when I get emotional about my mom and I dream, she comes in my dreams. And like it's always her. I know it's always her saying, like, I got you. And I think my mom would say, I'm so proud of you. I think she would tell me, wow, you're just as strong as your mother.
yeah.
Because
Yes.
the same fight that I saw in my mom when she was battling cancer was the same fight I saw in myself as I was trying to get my life back. Or I should say start my life over,
Yeah.
you know, because I'll never
Yeah.
get that back. Um,
You are your mother's daughter. You
yeah.
went through. And I say
Yeah.
that to you all the time. Because I also feel like I'm a mom figure to you, even though I'm not that much older than you, but I do always speak to you from a mom perspective, you
Yes.
know, and
Yes.
I always try to guide you like in the right direction. And one thing I have to say about Chastity, is that she has a fearless determination to just be happy. And I think that that's how you start to survive the grief. It's how you start to survive the storm, where you just have to be determined to get past it. I think that sometimes we resign ourselves to the sadness and we lose hope and we give up hope. And I think when you do that, then you keep yourself in a constant state of grief and mourning. You have to wake up every day and say, grief is not the end for me. This is just the process, and I will grieve through this
Mhm.
until I get to my joy, until I get to the happiness. And I think that that's something that you have done very well, even on your worst days, even on the days where you would, contact me and you would be bawling through your tears. The fact that you reached out to me was you saying, this is what I'm feeling, but I don't want to stay here. And I
Yeah.
need help and I need support.
Yeah.
And that was a decision you were making. Like you weren't denying what you were feeling, but you also were committed enough to your journey to say, I don't want to stay here. I don't want to be here. Because many times we grieve on our own and we stay there and we will keep ourselves there.
Yes. That's what I did the first year. And you said I will grieve through this and I will grow through this.
Yeah.
And I saw that change in my life. And there was this point where as I started like tackling goals and I started to feel better about myself, I then decided like, all right, I'm ready to go back to doing what I love. And, that's when I started teaching. So I didn't open the daycare again yet, but I wanted to just dive back into it. And I chose that instead because I knew like in doing the daycare at home, I would sort of like be alone. And
Right.
I think I wanted to be in community.
Yeah.
Being in community is also something else that I learned with you. It wasn't a word I said before, but
Yeah.
it's actually a necessity. I think that everyone needs to somehow be in community, even if you're not someone who's actively social and you don't go out a lot or you're not on social media that much. There's still ways to be in community. And for me, it was now going to this school and getting this job. And now it's like I'm around people and I'm doing what I love again. And that was like another big step for me because I hadn't done that in like 3 years. It took me that long to get there. And right now, I just felt like I wanted to share that because I want other people to know that it just because it takes a long time doesn't mean it's not going to happen. You just have to like be patient and you need to let things come when they're supposed to. Again, something I learned with Jesus, like God's plan, like let him do the work, you do your work. Don't rush anything because when it happens, and you don't rush it, it's going to be amazing. And I remember, those first like maybe 4 years of me dealing with grief and stuff, I felt worthless. I didn't feel capable. I didn't feel like I would be able to do this again, to teach again. I didn't really know. I felt like I didn't bring anything to the table. And I remember after I went on my interview, you were the first person I called.
Mm-hmm.
Was screaming, I was crying, and I was screaming with excitement because the interview went so well. And again, these are those moments that if you rob yourself of those moments,
Yeah.
you have no idea what you're cheating yourself of feeling because I left there and I felt so empowered. I felt so good because the feedback from my interview and how I felt like, yes, you put the suit on, you stepped in that room. And if these people only knew that 4 years prior, you weren't even walking out the house, you weren't brushing your hair, the lights were off, and you were hiding under the covers.
Yeah.
And now I'm 2 years teaching and
And
like,
you got a promotion the
a
first year in.
promotion? Yes, I got a promotion the first year. I got my raise, like, and I'm still getting great feedback. And I realized, like, wow, if I had let go of my dreams and I didn't push myself, I wouldn't have even known how great this feeling would be. I would have again robbed myself of that. And you know what? Maybe my kids wouldn't have this
Yeah.
teach. I would have sometimes I'm with them and I'm like, man, if I would have stood hiding in this dark space, I wouldn't have these moments with them that I love. And like that's something else that I gave myself. I gave myself another chance and in doing that, it gave me more confidence and it made me continue to strive for more. And then what was that? Next door that opened was I got my own apartment. I
A beautiful apartment, exactly how she wanted, full of
yes,
lights, a
yes.
building full of amenities. I mean, everything you could ask for, you have.
I prayed for this. I
Yes.
prayed for everything that I prayed for it. And specifically, all I said was, Jesus, like, give me light, get me out of the dark. Give me an apartment with lots of light. I didn't even say all the extra stuff. Just give me lots of light. And once I stepped into this place, I said, "Wow, Jesus, he did his thing." He was showing off, but I also felt like it was like when a parent rewards you, like here's where I'm gonna give you for your hard work.
Yeah.
And but I wouldn't have gotten this apartment if I hadn't gotten the job, if I hadn't pushed myself. I was gratefully living with my aunt, but I was upstairs. And sometimes in the past, I was embarrassed. I would say, like, I live in my aunt's attic that was set up like an apartment. But I
Right.
have learned now to say, yeah, I lived in the attic. You know why? Because I had to do what I needed to do. And that's where I did it. And I'm super grateful that she said, come stay here and take care of yourself. Take care of yourself.
Mhm.
Never told me I had to leave. Never expected nothing. She let me find myself while I was there. And then it led to all of this.
And look at you now.
Yeah.
So, what's next for you, Chastity? Now that you have started your life over, right? What's next for you?
I do have like other goals that I still want to tackle. I have one like special goal that I want to work on. And you know how I am, like I quietly do things because, well, it's like less pressure for me. But
Yeah.
aside from those goals, I think that next is love.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. Call it in, girl. Call it in. Because even though God knows the desires of our heart, He knows them, right? We don't need to
yeah,
tell Him, but we have to own them. And
yeah,
we have to be honest with ourselves about the things that we want. I think a lot of times we pretend we don't want certain things because we're afraid that they might not happen. So we try to convince ourselves, no, that's not something I really want. If
yeah,
it happens, it happens. But I've learned through my own journey is that we have to verbalize the things that we want and we have to claim it. And so that's why I say yes. I love that you're now really embracing that because I think that this is your time, this is your season for
yeah,
love because when it comes to love, when it comes to relationships, we attract who we are, whether
mhm,
we realize it or not. And if you're in a season where you're struggling with yourself, where you don't believe that you have value or that you're worthy of a certain type of love, then guess what? That's what you're going to attract. You're going to attract
yeah,
someone who's not going to value you, who's not going to treat you like you really want to be treated. It's not going to be a healthy love. And so I think that when we call love into our lives, we ourselves have to be in a healthy state of love with ourselves, have a healthy relationship with ourselves, so that that's what we're attracting in a potential partner. And I think you're absolutely there. You're ready. Like your whole um, progression has led you up until this point. You've done all the work already on
yeah,
yourself. And not to say that you're like there's no more work to be done, because I feel like we're always a work in process, right? There's always
yes,
opportunities for us to be better. But you're at a point where you're fully confident, where you know your worth, where you know what you bring to the table, that you don't need a partner to come into your life to take care of you, to provide for you. You do all that on your own, right? You need someone that's going to add
yes.
value to your life.
Yes, exactly. And I know like in the past years, as much as I would have wanted to welcome love, right? Because when you're grieving, you would love to have someone there. I couldn't. Like I
Right.
needed to really take care of myself. I needed to be okay for chastity first before before I could let someone else in. And what I'm trying to, work on now when it comes to love is I need to stop making myself feel like if I let love in, all my hopes and dreams stop. All my goals are going to stop. There's something that, like the past year, I was constantly telling myself was like, well, if you're in a relationship, then how are you going to focus on this next goal? How are you going to, keep working on yourself? Because I feel like, well, now you have to kind of share your time and but I have heard from other women, and I think, and including yourself, like, well, anyone who comes into your life, they should be lifting you up,
Mhm.
and you shouldn't feel like they would take you away from your dreams. So I'm trying to keep convincing myself that the right person will grow with me and not set me back. So I'm putting it out there. And it's like, even like when I'm cooking, I'm like, well, I'm cooking for my husband. I'm trying to manifest, because that's also something I did throughout all these years. I started like manifesting my life. And when I've learned with myself that if I'm really ready for something, I start saying it a lot. And if I say it a lot, like I really start doing the work for it. And I think that like I finally this year decided to like start talking to God about it. I had stopped talking to God about like love and a family, because I also thought to myself, why are you asking him for something that you're not ready for?
Mm,
So I put it aside, and I started asking him for things that I was ready for, and then he gave it to me. And so that's why now I can say, well, the next step is love, and not like Russian love, but just take it step by step,
yeah,
love that just feels good,
yeah.
so that's that's the next step for me.
Well, I can't wait to see this love manifest in your life. I know that it will. I will be right there, like a proud mom, just cheering you on. But I just want to thank you so much for being on the podcast, for being so transparent about your journey, for sharing so much. I know that whoever listens to this is going to be blessed by your testimony. Before I let you go, if there was one, I guess, piece of advice that you can offer to a listener who might not know where to start on their own journey, what would you tell them?
Well, are we talking about like the journey with grief as well, like me?
Yeah.
um Show up for yourself.
Mm,
That is one key thing that I constantly had to tell myself. Just show up, because in the beginning I wasn't showing up, and in not showing up, then nothing changes.
yeah.
So even if it means you show up and you show up in silence, if you're somewhere and you're listening, that alone will help. Um, and to have faith. I'd never force religion or Jesus on anyone, but whatever you believe in, then, or whoever you believe in, then have faith in that, but also have faith in yourself. Know that life does change, things do get better. The days do not stay dark and gloomy. I have seen I've seen the rainbow come after the storm. Like it really does happen. And if there's anything I needed to convince anyone, is that your days will get better. They will get better. And don't quit.
Thank you so much, Chastity. Thank you all for tuning in to this week's episode. I'm going to post Chastity's Instagram in the episode notes if you want to connect with her, if you want to send her a message for how her story has impacted you, please do that. And if you just want to congratulate her on her growth, you can do that as well. And until next time, mi gente, just remember that you were created for more.